Have you missed it? Like, do you guys think, I should have got in on Bitcoin?
I don't spend long
5 years
thinking
ago.
about it.
Bitcoin.
And Bitcoin is something that certainly a lot of people think, is going to rise as an alternative currency.
The Australian Bitcoin Podcast, presented by HardBlock.
It's not a currency, it's not money. I don't understand it.
Hey, hello, welcome to the Australian Bitcoin Podcast presented by HardBlock, Australia's longest running Bitcoin only exchange. My name's DJ and this is Mike. We both work at HardBlock, running their marketing and customer support. And just in case you hadn't noticed, we're giving the podcast a fresh coat of paint and a slightly new format as we continue the tradition of being the first and best place to get your Bitcoin-focused news, takes and insight from a uniquely Australian perspective. How you going, Mike?
Not too bad. Yourself?
Yeah, good, man. 24th of April, block height, 893,727. What's the price, USD?
We're sitting at 92K, hovering between 92K and 93K, so about 146K Aussie dollars.
AUD. Median house price in Bitcoin currently in Australia, we worked this out just before we went on air, it's over $1 million. And in Bitcoin terms, I think that's 7.14 BTC. And my favorite monetary stat through the whole network is the realized monetary inflation, 0.83%. I love the fact that any central banker out there that's aiming to get their inflation targets down to 2% still won't be able to beat Bitcoin now, let alone in the future.
Yes. That pricing, that the median house price in Bitcoin is always an interesting thing to give people pause when they're like, oh, Bitcoin, what's that? But then you say, well, you can buy a house with 7 Bitcoin. Oh, isn't it just numbers in a computer? No.
I mean, you got to find a buyer, obviously. And I think there was some people in Victoria earlier in the year or maybe late last year looking for a buyer of their property. It was just like a piece of land, a block of land in Bitcoin. I don't know how they're going. I don't know if they sold it. I wouldn't be parting with my Bitcoin for a block of land just yet. At 7 Bitcoin, no thanks. But actually, we've got a chart on our pinned on our HardBlock Twitter page, which gives a bit of an insight into how Bitcoin is falling. We've got 5 BTC, but this was published back in 2024. Well, that was the current price, but it's gone up since then because the median house price has risen. And for all intents and purposes, the Bitcoin price has crashed and it's all over. But, 7 Bitcoin.
Yes. Had a bit of an upset. Bit of Trump's tariffs has been a bit of a spanner in the works for the old bull market with Trump's tariffs causing a bit of havoc, a bit of scaring investors off globally in all markets, not just Bitcoin. But then, just recently, that caused a big slump a month ago, at the start of April. All markets took a hammering, Bitcoin took a hammering. And but just in the last week or so, that's come back a bit. Off the back of easing tensions or hopes for easing tensions between a potential tariff war, trade war with the US and China. We saw a 7% pump in Bitcoin off the back of that. I'm sure we'll get some new news in the next couple of weeks that'll either help it or hinder it further. We'll see what happens with old Trumpy doing some shenanigans over there.
Is it the conscious uncoupling of Gwyneth Paltrow? Is this Bitcoin price decoupling from traditional markets and forging ahead on its own? I mean, I read a tweet by Carl Menger that said Bitcoin hit a new all-time high against the NASDAQ, and it's currently outrunning the Wall Street elites, which is pretty cool to see. I mean, you were talking about the price run up before, 131,000 on Sunday just gone, so the 20th of April. And it ran up to about 147K. This is Australian. A couple of days later, so about a 7% pump. And what's interesting is that, at least amongst my friends and even myself, felt nothing. It was like, okay, like is there any more? Have you got any more? Like, I'm so, it's kind of like if you did a 7% pump intraday 5 years ago, or if it run up like some 16K, you'd probably lose your mind. It would have been incredible. And I just project forward into the future and imagine moving tens of thousands of dollars within the space of 24 hours and feeling nothing.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I think it's probably sentiments are a bit dampened a little bit after there was that big surge up to the all-time high, however many months ago that was, and then we had the retracement since then, and general consensus is that we are still in the bull market, and people have got hefty price predictions and hefty hopes on where things will get to in this current bull market, but it just hasn't materialized yet, and it does lead to questions. There's plenty of people speculating on, have we departed from the classic bull market cycle, the 4-year cycle? Are we seeing something else? Are we seeing a maturity form in the market here that's playing out before our eyes? Only time will tell. Plenty of speculation out there if you want to go and see what various pundits are saying. My personal perspective is pretty grounded. I think we'll see some increases, but again, anything can happen. I think it hinges off what Trump gets up to and what trade stuff starts happening. But end of the day, as long as your perspective is still that long term perspective, I think you'll be still in safe hands. It's that long play that we're in for.
Yeah, well, that's the move, right? If you're buying Bitcoin, whether it's from HardBlock or anyone else, and you're expecting to get rich overnight, as we say, you'd better lower your time preference and do a little bit more reading and a little bit more podcast listening. Get your 40 hours in, because this not the case. This is like 10, 20 years. 30, 50 years, who knows, 100-year kind of project in terms of individual families, at least for me anyway.
And I think most Bitcoiners understand that. Like if you watch, there's been some articles about it over the last month since the tariff chaos started happening early April. There's been large outflows from Bitcoin ETFs. So we're talking about, that IOU Bitcoin, not real Bitcoin that you can actually take self-custody of. It's just a little, it's a promise that, we've totally got Bitcoin for you guys. Don't worry about it. There were massive outflows of those ETF investments. Whereas in terms of real Bitcoin accumulation from whales, that has increased when the price took a dip earlier this month, while it was outflowing from ETFs. And so it's kind of like you can see the people that have done the research that are kind of, if they're still stacking. And it's those ETF holders that they don't have the conviction, they don't have the knowledge, they haven't done the research. They're all getting shaken out. They get skittish quite easily. Whereas everyone else is just like, great, discount, sats on sale, stacking.
Lettuce hands. Yeah. I mean, it's the Dave Portnoy move, right? You come in and you expect to make overnight gains, and if you genuinely have, I mean, if you're buying the ETF, no disrespect to anyone that is buying an ETF, it's like horses for courses. It's not my place to say that you're right or wrong, but spot Bitcoin is infinitely better, especially for the fact that you can take it into self custody, and I think that's like an extra level. So people talk about like with the ETFs, they're a really great way into Bitcoin, and they don't they kind of can hold your hand, sort of thing. It's like even, well, it's not even collaborative custody. It's it's worse than that. But I think doing the work to understand what this thing is crucial, and not everyone gets it. You have to do your 1,000 hours or whatever it is. 40 hours per week is perfectly fine. But if you're paying attention to all of the macro stuff, and we're going to get to this. I mean, we're going to try and introduce a new format for the show where we effectively do a little bit of a news roundup at the top. And ideally, we'll have a guest on once a fortnight or thereabouts every second show. We'll just see what happens with regards to booking and that sort of thing. But we've obviously had guests on the show before, and I think we're going to try and continue that, but make sure that we've got a little bit more of a format and a structure to the show. So yeah, with the news, obviously we're talking about the tariffs, we're talking about the price run up. We've got the Australian federal election coming up on the 3rd of May. Pre-polling is open currently. So we'll get to maybe talking a little bit about Bitcoin policies from our political elite and establishment. And we've got a couple of other ideas around mentioning ASIC crackdown on various crypto frauds, and this term that I'd never heard before until today, which is pig butchering. So we're going to have to get
Oh,
to
you're not
that.
familiar with pig butchering? It's
Can't
it's
say that I am.
pretty it's pretty
I mean,
grim.
pig hunting.
Yeah, it's a pretty grim way, but it's what scammers are like. They're just these like psychopaths out there that's what they genuinely think of their like fellow man, right? They're pigs to be slaughtered and people to be abused and exploited through manipulation and tactics. And that is the language that they use, and it just shows how insidious these people are. So as much as Bitcoiners battle against regulators and stuff, and decry all this like oppression from our illustrious institutions, it does go to show that there is a role for them to fill, which is there are scammers out there. They need to be brought to justice. They need to be spotlighted on, because they are evil people, and innocent Australians are being victimized by these folks. And so yeah, there is a role for institutions to help battle that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the other thing is I'm learning what that term is, and we'll get to that a little bit later on the show. I guess if we pivot back to tariffs and give everyone a bit of a TLDR on what's been happening with that, I think one of the things we'd like to do with this show is make sure that people can kind of get up to speed as quickly as possible within about half an hour, and if they don't spend all day on Twitter or listening to Bitcoin podcasts, they just choose one. So can you give us a little bit of an overview of what the tariffs have been doing since the last time we recorded, which was probably about 4 weeks ago, actually? We had JP on. In fact, we probably didn't even talk about tariffs then either. But my point being, for those that have been living under a rock, the US administration under President Donald Trump has been basically going hog wild with regards to the global macro environment, and a whole bunch of financial losses have been playing out over that time period. So I don't know if you can unpack that for us, Mike.
Yeah, so for anyone not aware, obviously Trump got elected, and he's got generally a positive stance on crypto and Bitcoin, which is it's been discussed to death already, and he's established his crypto czar and his strategic Bitcoin reserve and his crypto stockpile and all this quite interesting stuff, pro Bitcoin stuff, which is great to see. And just at the start of April, he's brought forward one of his other campaign promises, which is to bring in tariffs. And tariffs are, depending on who you talk to, some people love them, some people hate them. Most economists say that it's not a good thing, but that's if you're talking to a Keynesian economist. They're going to say tariffs bad. That's not the path you want to take, because it's a protectionist policy. So it's a way for governments to influence markets and free trade in a different way. A lot of people do just call it a tax, because it's kind of what it is. And if you watch politicians talk, they'll never admit that it's a tax. Some of them might do it by mistake, but ultimately it can be considered as a form of taxation. The negatives to tariffs is that it may and has caused prices to increase for end customers for different products. But that's that is the effect of a tariff. You're manipulating prices, you're changing the cost of inputs and the costs of selling goods in different regions. And so it is going to then influence consumer behavior, influence prices, and change things up. And the intended result from the Trump administration to do this is they're trying to bring manufacturing back to America, because obviously it's hard for American-based manufacturing and companies to compete with cheap labor from China and other sort of third world countries. So the idea is that you slap a massive tariff on imports from those countries, and suddenly it becomes viable for entrepreneurs to relocate their manufacturing back to America to avoid these tariffs coming in. And so, long story short, early this month, April 2025, he was sort of like Tariff D-Day, where he brought in all these different tariffs on different goods. And he did a very interesting sort of art of the deal ploy where he announced all these tariffs, and then just before they were, and then obviously it caused market chaos. Bitcoin price took a hit, lots of markets took a hit, people washed out, you probably saw tons of headlines of people getting wiped out in different markets. But then just before some of these things were really actually going to get implemented, he pulled back and said, anyone who didn't retaliate, we're not going to levy the harshest amount of tariffs that we were going to bring in. And so he kind of baited China into retaliation, and various countries into retaliating. Something that doesn't get spoken about much is the EU was also baited into retaliation, which our mainstream media hasn't talked about too much. They've talked about China retaliating, but the EU kind of got a pass there, which I found quite interesting. Anyway, not to get too far off track, that's caused this roller coaster in various markets and the Bitcoin price. And the most recent surge that we saw in the Bitcoin price was off the back of hopes of easing this tension that, after China retaliated with additional tariffs, but then there's been this sort of like negotiation process happening and good news, positive sentiment coming out of that there might be some kind of resolution that gets reached, and investors are coming back to the party and spending money again. So that's why we're seeing a resurgence in various markets.
Yeah, well, I was reading earlier a tweet by Seyfedin Ammous, obviously author of the Bitcoin Standard. If you're new to Bitcoin, you haven't read that book yet, you should probably go and buy a copy. But he wrote a really lengthy tweet. It was a tweet thread, but he was maximizing the amount of characters he could fit per tweet. It was almost a book. And it was talking about the art of the cave and how Trump effectively, his tariff plan has backfired, and that it crashed stocks and bonds, bond yields ripped, which was the exact opposite of the goal. And it basically demonstrated, because China held out, that the US fiscal situation isn't all that it's cracked up to be. And given the fact that China has lower debt as a proportion of GDP, and therefore can, borrow at cheaper rates, tariffs are kind of not doing, I think, what they intended to do. This was Seyfedin's point. And you've got, like the Art of the Deal Bros. And I've read that book. It's actually really, really interesting. The fact that he can get an entire hotel complex constructed without spending a single dime of his own money is amazing. I'd love to be able to do that. But the point of Safe's tweet was that, it's kind of, he's caving and it's backfiring. And then to follow that up, there was another tweet by Spencer Hackmian, and he was talking about how the US tariffs flipping from 50 to 145%, and auto tariff exemptions were then getting reversed. It basically, it's just policy chaos, and China have kind of got the upper hand here. I don't know. I'm not a tariff expert, and it's way too over my head to even be able to unpack that, were it not for asking Grok to TLDR it for me. But the point, I think, is, as Matt Odell would say, just stack sats, keep saving in Bitcoin, take it into self-custody, and, live your life,
That's it. I mean, it's a very nuanced topic. It's hard to form a informed opinion on tariffs, especially if you're a Bitcoiner and you subscribe to free market ideals and even Austrian economics. I mean, it'd be interesting to read more about an Austrian economist's perspective on tariffs, because ultimately they're not free market. They're basically government imposing or some authority imposing forces on global markets, and it does result in a less efficient allocation of resources, because if you take a global perspective, yeah, it makes sense to manufacture things where labor is cheapest, but then you result in this, these rust belts and decaying societies where previously you made stuff yourself, but then it got shipped over to China. And so, like, my personal opinion is, like, I like tariffs because, if we had tariffs here in Australia, yes, things might be more expensive because we can't just get a bunch of cheap crap over from China, because the Australian labor wage is $50 an hour instead of $5 an hour over in China or Vietnam. But is that such a bad thing? If you call yourself an environmentalist, that's resulting in less wasteful consumption, and we're kind of making more meaningful choices and purchases with our money. But again, that's against free market principles, which a lot of Bitcoiners subscribe to. So it is very hard to have a solid opinion one way or the other on tariffs. I think, again, you can just pick your opinion, but then, as you said, just keep stacking Bitcoin, because Bitcoin doesn't care. Yeah,
I mean, that's the beauty of the financial situation, or the game that we find ourselves playing, is a lot of this stuff you don't even have to pay attention to. It's nice to know about, and it can go and give you a little bit of a guide. But effectively, if you're setting up like a DCA option, $10 a day, $50 a week, whatever it is, it's sort of set and forget. And then if you have your auto withdrawal set, which we've got at HardBlock, you don't even have to worry about that either. It's literally, it's the cheat code. They call it a cheat code for a reason. I was trying to think of some comment that Henry Hazlitt wrote about in his book, Economics in One Lesson. And I mean, effectively, the way that book explains itself is that making a change over here is going to do untold changes over there. And it's the seen and the unseen, effectively, from Bastiat. And I was trying to think through what tariffs would do in that perspective. So while they do look cool, or like maybe net positive over here, they're having a net negative effect. I remember seeing some tweets from some manufacturers, or rather some producers in America, who had put an order in for a bunch of products, raw materials and things, to come over from China. And they had to effectively halt that order because they couldn't afford to pay the extra amount, like that had occurred within sort of 48 hours or something. So, I mean, it's an incredibly complicated issue, and I'm certainly not one to unpack it. But all I would say is, look, if it results like the rumor is that they would get rid of income tax, and just put up some tariffs, that sounds pretty good to me, right? I would just like it.
They have talked about that idea, right? But me being the eternal pessimist, is I can just see, a government that's still ultimately fear, despite their positive sentiment towards Bitcoin and crypto and all of that, it's still a fiat government in my mind. And I think that the end result is just going to be they'll have the tariffs, they'll take the tariffs and the extra taxation revenue from that, and they'll keep the income tax, and they'll just keep gobbling up whatever they can. But I'd love to be pleasantly surprised and see them come through on that repealing of income tax, because that would be, again, it's one of these things where if they can do it, then maybe we can do it. So yeah, I'd love to see that.
I'm not going to hold my breath. What's the equivalent of an Australian tipping tea into the harbour?
Throwing beer off the lorry.
Beer off the
chucking crates of beer off the back of the ute. Yeah,
well, I mean, we were almost getting to that point, aren't we? Beer. Is it twice a year? I think they increase the tax on alcohol in this country. It's insane. Whatever it is, it's insane. Yeah. I ran up a chart earlier. Price of Cooper's priced in Bitcoin. I'd have to bring it up. but it was
How
pretty.
just being sats.
It's getting a lot cheaper, I can tell you that much. Why don't I bring it up? 1 second.
Yeah, the US can repeal their income tax. I just want them to repeal their alcohol excise here. I'll take that. Maybe cigarettes.
So I made up 2 charts. Yeah, well, cigarettes, I don't know. I'm don't get me started. So what do we got? Cooper's Original Pale Ale case, 24 beers, 375 mils. Price between 2020, so 5-year price, 2020 to 2025. In 2020, case of Cooper's is going to cost you about $50 AUD, or 62.5. That's not BTC, surely. That's Sats. And then, yeah, so 620,000, is that right? And then it's going down, yeah, and then it's fallen to roughly, what do we got, 50,000? Anyway, the point of the thing is that case of Cooper's is now going to cost you up to 62.5.
So you're suggesting if you're an alcoholic, you should also be a Bitcoiner.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's a whole nother purity test that I'm not really willing to to pass through. But if you like drinking beer and you like to drink it because you like to drink it and you want to drink cheaper beer, I would probably start saving in Bitcoin. It's a really cool website, priceinbitcoin21.com. It doesn't have the price of Coopers on that website, unfortunately. It's an American-centric one, but it's a good website to consult every now and again. Just to get an idea of, the power of Bitcoin as it increases your purchasing power over time,
Should we talk about the election?
Yeah, let's talk about the election. That sounds like an excellent use of my time. Where are you at with this? We've got voting on the 3rd of May, on a Saturday, 3rd of May. You get your sausage sizzle, so that's always good. Huge incentive to get along and write down your preferences on a piece of paper, stuff it in the box, and vote as hard as you can. So what are you going to do?
It's Australian elections are always like exercise in
just
futility.
that. They're literally that.
Yeah, big sigh. Exercise in futility. It feels like it's just this ritual. It's a ritual that we go through at this point. We think that our vote counts, and we think that our leaders are really genuinely listening to us. And every time one rolls around, it seems like that's less and less the case. And people have probably been saying that forever. And it's ironic in this world of, everyone can be on social media. Everyone's got a supercomputer in their pocket they can use to communicate on a whim. Mm-hmm. It does genuinely feel like our leaders are less and less accessible and less willing to listen to what genuine Australians want. But again, the pessimist in me is like, well, maybe what our leaders are serving up are what the majority, the 80% of people do want, and they are playing to that tune, and we're just that uneducated and misguided that's what we keep getting served up because maybe we deserve it. Maybe we really are asking for it. Hopefully not, but that's just some realist pessimism coming through.
Well, there's a palpable sense of apathy. I think that is, I don't know, in my little corner of the world for sure. But it's hard to actually discern whether or not I genuinely think most people just don't care. And the vast majority, depending on the demographics and the voting bloc, it's mostly, older Australians that want their property prices to be pumped to the moon. They're just following their incentives. And I think that's what anyone and everyone is doing. I don't dig the fact that you don't have a choice not to vote. Like if you don't show up, they'll fine you. I think that's incredibly coercive, and to take away that choice is not great. But again, by the same token, if you don't show up and you don't cast a vote, you can't whinge at the end of the day. It depends on what electorate you're in as well. and whether or not you've even got a shot in hell of making a dent. You know, there's so many variables. And again, I'm not a Australian electoral policy wonk, and I've got only just my own personal experience. But I guess the reason we wanted to bring up the Australian federal election was not to bemoan it, but obviously from a Bitcoin perspective, you become a bit of a single issue voter, and it's like, well, okay, which of the major parties, if any, has a policy platform that even remotely mentions Bitcoin? I mean, at this point, I don't think there's any, and I don't think there's even any that has like a crypto policy standpoint. So,
No.
I asked Grok to run me a TLDR on each of the major parties, the Labor Party, the Liberal Party, and the Greens. I didn't bother asking it about the Trumpet of Patriots or One Nation. I think they're both relatively silent on that. I don't know where that Trumpet of Patriots name comes from. But what they said about the Australian...
So Trumpet of Patriots was a party that was registered quite a few cycles ago, but they never actually kind of went and actually ran with it. So it was actually quite an old name before Trump was even on the scene.
Okay.
But then they've just, old mate Clive Palmer's jumped on it as a, he likes the, I don't know what the right word is, alliteration or just that
association
with Trump, association with Trump. Yeah. And that's why they've went with it. It's just an interesting thing. It's been around. That party was registered ages ago.
That's insane. I had no idea. Well, the TLDR of the Australian Labor Party's Bitcoin policy is effectively they just aim to continue to regulate cryptocurrencies in order to boost the economy. They want to protect the consumer, which is fair. Key points include a licensing framework for digital asset platforms by 2026, establishing rules for stablecoins and custody providers, and promoting innovation in the crypto sector without specific plans necessarily for a Bitcoin reserve or tax exemptions. Effectively, they're focused on clarity and safety.
Which party was that, sorry?
This is the Labor Party.
Labor Party, yep.
And then the Liberal Party is effectively the same. Surprise, surprise. They support a pro-crypto stance, promising to prioritize legislation for a licensing framework to regulate digital asset providers and protect investors, while aiming to foster growth in the sector. However, it says they lack specific commitments like a Bitcoin reserve or tax changes, again, focusing on regulatory clarity in order to keep Australia competitive globally. So we're certainly not talking about a strategic Bitcoin reserve. If we just briefly mention the Greens, effectively their broader economic and environmental stances suggest a cautious approach. They're obviously still thinking about financial instability, inequality, environmental harm from energy-intensive Bitcoin mining or crypto mining, as the TLDR says. So, surprise, surprise there. In fact, the only party, and they're certainly not a major party, but they're kicking up a bit of a stink. They're getting a little bit of attention. The Australian Libertarian Party's Bitcoin policy, which they launched back at the start of March, at Bitcoin Alive, the Australian Bitcoin conference, and they unveiled an entire white paper. Basically, they're advocating for Bitcoin into the Australian financial system. Key points include establishing an Australian strategic Bitcoin reserve, promoting self-custody for financial sovereignty, removing capital gains tax on everyday Bitcoin transactions. Geez, imagine that. And encouraging Bitcoin mining with renewable or stranded energy resources to enhance grid stability and minimize environmental impact. I mean, that's like a Bitcoiner wrote that policy effectively. And it would position Australia as a leader in financial innovation while emphasizing personal and financial autonomy. That sounds pretty good to me. And as a single issue voter, it's pretty, if I'm going to be compelled to vote by threat of a fine, I think I know where I'm going to cast it. You know what I'm saying? Might leave a penis off this time around.
Yeah. Well, props where props are due. The Libertarian Party is the one and only that's come forward with an overtly pro Bitcoin stance, specifically Bitcoin. They they've engaged with the Bitcoin community. They engaged with them to inform their Bitcoin policy that they've put out. They spoke at Bitcoin Alive in Sydney earlier this year, and so they're the ones that are really actually engaging with Bitcoin and promoting Bitcoin. So definitely have to give them some props there. And yeah, I think you had it right. The Liberal Labour Party, all they talk about in regards to crypto is just regulation. They're just talking about regulation, safety. That Care Bear, Big Daddy government's going to come and save us all with their regulation. And so no real surprises or anything interesting there. It just seems, it's just not interesting. Greens, they're pulling out that old, Bitcoin's bad for the environment thing. Once they find out that they can use crypto to control people's carbon footprint or something through taxation, through crypto tokens, then they'll be all in on cryptocurrency, I'm sure. But the other thing that is happening this election cycle, it's kind of started last time. It was very simmering. It was very, very early doors, but it's more pronounced this time, is the concept of these freedom parties. There's a lot of freedom parties that are showing their hand now. So we got obviously the Trumpeter Patriots, the Libertarian Party, Gerard Rennick, some of these independent guys that are spinning out larger
People First or something like that.
Yeah, People First. Yeah, that's it. So there's these parties that are all they call themselves like freedom-oriented parties, and even though the Libertarian Party is the only one that's putting out an overtly pro-Bitcoin stance and Bitcoin policies, these freedom parties do have a bit of a sort of Venn diagram crossover with a lot of ethos of Bitcoin in terms of freedom and sovereignty and that sort of thing. They'll be anti-CBDCs, they'll be anti-free speech controls, they'll be anti, restrictions on small business and entrepreneurship and all that sort of stuff. So it does, and this is a good thing and a bad thing. Like we're almost a bit spoiled for choice. If you're a freedom-oriented person, you are a bit spoiled for choice in terms of all these little freedom-oriented parties that are available. But the double-edged sword of that is that it is then splitting this freedom-oriented vote amongst all these smaller players, which because of our voting system, if you don't really think about where you're numbering those boxes, your vote will probably still end up in the Liberal or Labor camp
Right.
at the end of the day, unless you're very specific with the way that you preference your voting. So my advice to people would be to, if one of these freedom-oriented parties has caught your eye, try and educate yourself on how the actual voting system works, because basically the short and skinny of it, if you put your Trumpeter Patriots as number one and then you put Liberals number two, because you've always been a Liberal voter, you like the Trumpeter Patriots and their policies, whatever, and you put Trumpeter Patriots first, Liberal second, then your vote is basically a Liberal vote.
Yeah,
is
exactly.
the TLDR of the way the system works. That's a Liberal vote. Whereas if you take the time to think about it and you go, freedom-oriented party 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and you put your major parties at the bottom, then your vote is more likely going to go into one of these buckets rather than just become a Liberal or a Labor vote. So that would be my not trying to be preachy on politics, because everyone loves a preachy political pundit. But have a think about that, because if you've made up your mind that you don't want either of the major parties to just get back in scot-free, have a think about how you would vote, and then encourage other people around you to do a similar thing, so that your vote does end up in one of the buckets of these guys, rather than the traditional dinosaurs that just want to regulate and destroy us all.
Yeah, well, they want to look after us, man. It's all for your safety. I was reading earlier that
For my safety.
One Nation has recently changed their preferences. They're originally intending to preference the minor conservative or the freedom parties over the major parties, but apparently recently they reprinted some how to vote cards, and now a lot of their preferences are going to the Liberal Party. bring a low time preference point of view or energy into the voting booth and just take the time to start numbering above. Is it below the line? It's below the line, isn't it? When you're casting your vote, just be intentional. I think it's the same with anything in this life. If you bring a sense of intention and cognition and will to what it is that you're doing, you're going to get a better outcome, irrespective of the person voting next to you or not. Vote for your wallet and vote with your wallet, vote with your feet. And I don't know, man, like it's an interesting shift as well, I think. And I don't like to think too hard about it because it doesn't really do anything for me.
Yes, I mean, if I could, have the ear of every Australian willing to listen and say and want to make a bit of a statement, what the outcome of this election will probably be is the Liberals are going to get a strong message that they're not talking to their base, their traditional base, like they should be, and they're hemorrhaging a lot of votes to these freedom-oriented parties that would traditionally have voted Liberal, but instead, because the Liberals are dropping the ball, they're going to go for these freedom-oriented parties as well. And the result is that Labor will just coast through for an easy victory. That's the probable outcome. That's where my money is. What I would hope is that the better message for the Australian public to send would be, and this sounds a bit cringy, a bit revolutionary. I don't know if revolutionary is the right word, but if people just stopped voting, just take the fine and then just don't pay the fine, and you get enough Australians doing that, that's sending a message that we're just genuinely unhappy. I don't know. I just feel like enough people are feeling like their voices are not getting heard because of the way the structure's set up and the way these freedom-oriented parties have stepped forward. It's splitting hairs, and it's resulting in possibly an even worse result than people voting for a freedom-oriented party would want. Mm-hmm. Like we may see, a month from now, Labor has a resounding victory. Greens get a good head in, and we find less freedoms than before. Which maybe that's what we need. Maybe that's what Australians actually need to realize what's at stake if things go off the rails a bit and we see our freedoms really start to get curtailed in the name of the climate cult or whatever demon you're currently concerned about.
So yeah, I mean, the pig butchering will continue until morale improves. Talk to me a little bit about what pig butchering is, because I read in the HardBlock newsletter this week that ASIC have been cracking down on these frauds, Hydra firms, and scams, which are called pig butchering.
Yeah, so for anyone not aware, there's a lot of scams out there, and hopefully everyone is up to scratch on their cybersecurity and their general operational security. They're checking emails that are coming into their inbox. They're checking who they're coming from. They're checking phone numbers. They're ideally not answering phone numbers that are not known to them, because every now and then you'll get an attempt on your phone number or your email inbox from one of these scammers. If they know that you're into crypto, then you are a bit more of a juicy target, because they know that you're not a super duper risk averse person. You are looking at these emerging technologies and emerging just things that are out there, and so pig butchering refers to this sort of method of scamming where you might get what's called a romance scam or other terms, where someone calls up and they might say, "Oh, there's a missed call. I was trying to speak to Simon." I was like, "Oh no, this is Bob." Oh, and then they'll tell a story and they'll have a conversation with you and they'll try and hook you in, and a lot of them are, they turn out to be this 21-year-old Taiwanese girl who's studying and doing something, and they'll keep a conversation going with you back and forth, and the idea is that they're fattening up this pig. They're fattening you up as this pig that eventually they're going to butcher and basically scam you. They're going to be saying, you know, they'll tell the story over multiple months, where this is a long process. It's not just like they call you up and then immediately ask you to send Bitcoin to them,
Right.
or ask you to send Aussie dollars to them, or Ethereum, or whatever scam coin is currently hot. They have a conversation with you for months and months and months, and they're building you up and they're building you up and they're getting you invested. And they think you think that this relationship is real, and then they'll say, my uncle has just died and I need to pay for his medical bill, or I want to escape my oppressive family in China, help me move to Australia, and we can have a lovely life together. I just need 2 Bitcoin. I just need 2 Bitcoin to get out of here. And then because you've spent 6 months talking to this person, you send them the Bitcoin and suddenly they're gone. And because it's Bitcoin, as we know, there's no chargebacks, there's no rollbacks, you can't wind back the blockchain. You can't call up ANZ and say, hey, I got scammed, so I need you to... I've lost
Can we
20
roll that
grand.
back?
Please
Can
roll
I
that
go
back,
to the
please?
courts and sue
Yeah,
them or whatever?
take it
There's
to the
no
courts.
recourse.
Exactly. So, yes, that's what's been happening. And so ASIC recently has done a big sort of blitz, shutting down 95 companies associated with this sort of activity. But they call it a hydra. And if people are not familiar with a hydra, that's the idea where you cut off one head and then 2 heads appear. So this is not something that will go away ever. I mean, I do have ideas of ways to make it go away that are not necessarily friendly enough to speak about here.
It's not family friendly.
Not family friendly.
Podcast.
No, not on a family friendly Bitcoin podcast. But these scams are not going away is kind of the point I want to make. So no matter what ASIC does, no matter what spotlight gets made on these activities, no matter what companies they shut down, a few people get slapped on the wrist, a few people get found and arrested. The reality is these kinds of scams are going to be here forever. And so you need to equip yourself with the knowledge that these exist. And you need to be looking out for your family and particularly, your elderly, your grandparents are obviously the number one targets of this. But even young people, even like Zoomers and stuff are known to fall prey to these sorts of scams because, there's that innocence, right? It's like, surely this is legit. I'm not being scammed, because they haven't been scammed up to that point. They think there's still good in the world, right? So they'll trust people, and then bam, they get scammed. So you need to be aware of these things, aware of these people out there, and help your community, help your family, help your friends, make them aware of this sort of stuff going on. Because, in HardBlock, we're dealing with this every day, right? A lot of crypto exchanges, a lot of Bitcoin exchanges in Australia, we are getting hit with debanking and regulations and all this sort of stuff, and all these hoops we have to jump through with our Australian regulators, because the Australian regulators and the banks are dealing with Australians getting scammed and losing all their money. They're sending Bitcoin overseas to nefarious people. And then they're turning around and saying, well, why didn't you help me? Why didn't you protect me? And that results in heightening regulation against businesses like us, stopping us from serving customers who just want to buy and stack Bitcoin. They know what they're doing. They're not going to get scammed. But those people get held back by other people getting victimized by these pig butchering scams and stuff. So there's different things to talk about what can be done, but at the very least, you need to be knowledgeable about these things. You need to equip yourself with the knowledge of what these scams are and what their techniques are like, and help educate your friends and family so that they don't fall victim to them. Yeah,
be aware, think twice, and if it sounds too ridiculous to be true, it's entirely possible that it is. It's the TLDR there. Now, at this point, in the show, it would be cool. At some point, we're going to introduce a guest into the show, and we'll probably have the guest on the entire time. But we also want to try and include and increase audience interaction. So if you're listening to the Australian Bitcoin podcast, you're enjoying the show, you've been enjoying it since the day we started. I think this is episode 86. From memory. And, if you've been listening to it for a long time and you have a comment or a question or some sort of shout out that you want to give the show, jump onto an app like Podcasting 2.0 app like Fountain or Breeze. Maybe send us a tweet on Twitter or X, whatever you call it. I refuse to call it X, actually. It's still Twitter. I'm a Luddite. You could even email us as well. content@hardblock.com.au is a good email to send to. And if you've got questions, it'd be cool to get some audience interaction involved in the show, just as a little bit more back and forth, because effectively what we would like to do, right, Mike, is improve the Australian Bitcoin presence within the Bitcoin space, effectively. And, we're small fry in terms of news and goings on in and around the Bitcoin ecosystem. The US dominates, Europe dominates. However, we do have a lot of cool things going on in this country with a lot of incredibly talented individuals that are just happen to be Australian. So shining a light on that. And, any old pleb that's out there listening that digs what you hear, send us a comment and we'll try and get that interaction improved and increased on the show as we go along.
Yep. Yeah. Any questions you've got? Any topics you want us to tackle? Any questions you want answered? Any recommendations of people who should get on the podcast, have a chat with? Send that through, and we'd love to hear from you.
100%. Now let's wind this down. But I've read just before we went on air, Bitcoin is now the 5th most valuable asset globally. It's surging past Alphabet, which is formerly Google, silver, which is the commodity, and Amazon. It's the 5th most valuable asset in the world at over $1.8 trillion. So obviously we did that late December 2024 when we hit the current all-time high of about 108,000 USD. But this is pretty cool. This 12% weekly surge that just occurred over the last 7 days or thereabouts. More valuable than some of the top companies in the world, which is pretty nuts. Yeah.
So first we got to deal with the rest of these companies. What is it? Probably Apple, Tesla, Nvidia, BlackRock.
There's a few on there that we've got to take down in order to become the global neutral reserve asset.
So once we've dealt with them, we just need to deal with a few pesky fiat currencies: yen, euro, USD. They'll all fall, all of them, in turn, in time.
Yeah, well, I was reading on Porkopoulos's website that Bitcoin, this last update was Q4 2024, so it may have changed with recent price action, but he's Mike Mazinskis, I think his name is. He's got Bitcoin at 6th top monetary asset worldwide, just below the yen, the yuan, the euro, and the dollar, and of course gold. So that's nothing to sneeze at. We're dominating currently the British pound, the mighty British pound, and the Pacific peso, the Australian dollar, is not even on the chart. It's got the top 13 on the chart. So, if you're saving in Australian dollars and thinking that you're getting ahead, you might want to reach out and ask us a little bit about Bitcoin, whether you listen to this show or we've got an easy Bitcoin booklet, Learn Bitcoin in Less than 10 minutes, which you can download off of our website. And we've also got our Zero to Hero email chain about to spin up. So, there's really no excuses to start learning about Bitcoin and stacking sats and ensuring that you've got a bit more of a brighter future and that your currency of choice is the dominating currency of choice, around the world.
Nice one. Yeah. I've got one more thing I want to talk about, and then we can wrap up if you'd like.
Yeah, man.
And so moving forward, next time we'll probably do a bit more of a quick fire on some headlines before diving into some bigger topics, and then try and keep it on a Aussie focus as much as we can. The other thing I just want to mention before we drop off is if you are into design, Bitcoin design, the Bitcoin design community is putting on they're calling it a design-a-thon. So it's like the design version of a hackathon. If you've ever heard of a hackathon, which is typically software development related, they're doing a design-a-thon. And the idea is, Bitcoin's great. It's got a lot of technologists, it's got a lot of developers, got a lot of, systems thinkers and cryptographers. But what's lacking in Bitcoin a little bit is just this design and kind of the user experience as people interact with Bitcoin. So if you consider yourself a bit of a design buff, bit of an artist type, creative type, have a think about checking it out. There are prizes. You can check it out at event.bitcoin.design. So it's run by the Bitcoin design community. Get involved, flex your creative skills, your design skills, and get involved in contributing to Bitcoin, even if you're not a developer, which I quite like personally. I'm not a developer. I have a layman's understanding of code and all that sort of stuff, but I'm definitely more of a touchy-feely, designy type person. So it appealed to me, and if it's interesting for anyone else out there, check it out.
Right on. Well, Mike, I mean, look, we'll bring a little bit more structure and form to the show as we go along. We're sort of dipping the toe. But it's been a pleasure to kick it with you and discuss the recent events of Bitcoin in Australia over the last couple of weeks. Thanks, man.
No worries. Good to chat.